Good afternoon. My name is Gerald Guilbeaux. I'm conductor of the Acadian Wind Symphony and the Lafayette Concert Band in Lafayette, Louisiana. Welcome all of you to our session. Allow me a few minutes to introduce our very special guest. Director Emeritus Colonel John Bourgeois, United States Marine Corps retired, was the 25th director of the President's own United States Marine Band. His acclaimed career spanned 9 presidential administrations, from Presidents Dwight D. Eisenhower to Bill Clinton. Bourgeois is a graduate of Loyola University in New Orleans. He joined the Marine Corps in 1956 and entered the President's own as a French hornist and arranger in 1958. Named director of the Marine Band in 1979, Bourgeois was promoted to colonel in June of 1983. He retired from active duty July 11th, 1996. As director of the President's own, Bourgeois was music advisor to the White House. He selected the musical program and directed the band on its traditional place of honor at the U.S. Capitol for 4 presidential inaugurations, a Marine Band tradition dating back to 1801. He regularly conducted the Marine Band and the Marine Chamber Orchestra at the White House, appearing there more frequently than any other musician in the nation. Since retiring from the Marine Band, he has been actively involved in music as a guest conductor, has published new editions of classic band compositions, and is a visiting professor in a chair endowed in his name at Loyola University in New Orleans. Please help me and join me in welcoming Colonel John R. Bourgeois. Colonel, how are you, sir?
Fine, Gerald. Thank you. Welcome, my fellow Louisianans.
Welcome home. Welcome home.
Thank you. Got some gumbo?
Yeah, it's on the stove as we speak. Tell us a little bit about your early years. You have a new book coming out, and part of the title is From the Bayou to the White House. Tell us a little bit about the Bayou years of your life.
Well, I was literally born on the banks of Bayou Black in Gibson, Louisiana. And then I went to school in Gibson, at Gibson Elementary. And in 1942, in the 3rd grade, I became the product of a traveling musician with his instruments of drum kits, clarinets, tonets, cornets, what have you. And my parents took me to see the instruments. And so my mother got her interest was in the clarinet. So I ordered a clarinet. They gave me a tonet and a music book until the clarinet arrived. Well, the clarinet and I did not get along too well. So my choice then was the cornet, which was my father's choice. And the cornet became my instrument or weapon of choice. I say weapon because the first tune that was recognizable that I played on my Rubank Elementary was the Marines hymn. And my uncle, my parent, godfather, was a Marine at Guadalcanal. So my mother was very proud in my Marine interest. Well, we lived in, as I say, lived in Gibson. Then we moved across the river. My father worked for Shell Oil Company in exploration. And we moved first, I think, to Laplace and then Good Hope. And I continued music lessons at Destrehan High School. Father Bastille at St. Charles Borromeo sent me for music lessons at the high school next door. And then around, I think in 1945, we moved to Metry. My father built a house in Metry. And then I went to St. Catherine of Siena in Metry. And then I went to Jesuit High School from there, still playing the cornet. This is where I met my first real band director, Mr. Salvador Castigliola, who had been a trumpet player in the Orpheum Theater. And he suggested that I change from cornet to French horn. And I became principal French horn. I was the only French horn for a while, but still principal. And he also instilled a great love of music. We consider then, band music, what have you. Mr. Cass played almost everything was a transcription, all of the overtures. And as a horn player, I got to have quite a workout. I recall on the same concert, Oberon, the intermezzo from Midsummer Night's Dream, and the Andante Cantabile from the Tchaikovsky Five. That was quite a workout, but he did instill a great love of music to me. And also, I became the sort of band leader in my senior year. Mr. Cass became ill. And so I designed and took the band to Pensacola to play the opposing Jesuit high school there in Pensacola. I had written a halftime show which featured, for tropical Florida, music from South Pacific, and in particularly Valley High. Well, we got to Pensacola, and it was 33 degrees. It was the coldest I'd ever been in my life. The halftime show was very effective because the palm tree that had branches swaying to Valley High, the fronds were frozen too. But that was my high school experience. And then also in my senior year, when I went to Jesuit, you took band. And if you didn't take band, everyone took elocution, the public speaking. So when I was having band rehearsal, everyone was doing Horatio's address to his troops and what have you. And my senior English teacher said, Bourgeois, I think you ought to look at something beyond band. Continue band, but you can broaden your horizon, because I really was like a skinny, introverted kid. So we met after school, and he wanted me to try out for the Philolactic Society, the drama society. And he assigned me the long Hamlet soliloquy, "Oh, this too solid flesh should melt," etc., and with gestures. And then you had to audition to be in the Philolactic Society. Well, I went to the audition, and all of my fellow cohorts were giving all the same old speeches that they had learned over for 4 years before, and I had this big soliloquy. Well, I won the audition, and then the play that year was Twelfth Night. And I got one of the roles as one of the Shakespearean clowns. And then the play opens with the words that became my mantra in life. If music be the food of love, play on. And hence you'll get to play on later.
Exactly.
So I played on, and then my horn capacity was such that I was offered scholarships to LSU, Tulane, and Loyola. And I selected Loyola and was a horn major there with several great horn teachers, Vince Arso and his father, and then later Richard Mackey, who was in the Cleveland Orchestra, Myron Bloom, who was principal horn of Cleveland, who just passed away recently, and Bob Elworthy, who was a Farkas protege. So I had some really great horn teachers then.
Who was the band director at Loyola during that time?
George Jansen, who was a trumpet player in the orchestra, the New Orleans Philharmonic, had been in the West Point band, and he really was my first introduction to wind band music, and he was very avidly a wind band person. And also he was a master teacher, because at that time he was teaching a young kid from New Orleans named Wynton Marsalis. And when I became assistant director of the band, Mr. Jansen sent me this tape of this kid, Marsalis, playing Second Brandenburg, everything, and he played as well then as he does now, even before he went to Juilliard. He was a phenomenon. Well, Jansen was a great influence on my life there. Several other people. There was a great concert pianist who was a student of Bela Bartok named Istvan Nadash, and he took no prisoners. So, and he sort of befriended me. He was also a composer. I turn pages for his violin sonata, and also he taught me extracurricularly music and was very insistent. I think I was very much a romanticist, like a Tchaikovsky and what have you. And his summation of Tchaikovsky was too much Coca-Cola.
So your musical experience at Loyola was very rewarding, and New Orleans at the time had an opera and the symphony and so forth.
New Orleans in the 50s. I graduated from high school in 53, but New Orleans really was a musical mecca. We had the opera, we had the New Orleans Philharmonic, we had summer pops, the Metropolitan Opera came on tour. I got to hear Toscanini on tour with NBC in a performance of the Tchaikovsky Manfred Symphony. Heard the Community concert series with Jascha Heifetz, Leopold Stokowski conducting the Philharmonia. It was great, a great time then.
Colonel, I don't want to interrupt you, but I think we have a visitor behind you.
This is Will, or Willful, yes, Will, please. I left a sign for you not to disturb me.
So you had all of this going for you, but in 1956, you decided to go in a different direction, so to speak.
A direction was decided for me. Amongst my accomplishments at Loyola, I went from that sort of introverted kid into this sort of social everything butterfly. I joined everything. I was a newspaper reporter. I was president of the freshman class. I was a student council. I joined the Thespians and being panned by my critic over here. And so my only true accomplishment at Loyola was I flunked trigonometry 3 times. But my math instructor went to the dean of students and said, no one can teach bourgeois trigonometry. I wrote on my final blue book, said the sign to the radius vector, could you tell me which angle I'm next to? Said he, be complacent. You'll soon be adjacent when you're joined to a negative sector. That's utter nonsense. Trigonometry. I could memorize the formula and what have you, but the applications didn't need a thing. And then in 1956, in my same manner of trigonometry, I flunked ROTC. So as a result, I received a letter, a draft notice, and had I opened it, I would have been enlisted immediately into the Army. I didn't open it, so I went to the Marine recruiter and was enlisted in the Marine Corps. And the rest is
the rest is history. So you go, your Marine Corps experience initially was not musically involved.
Well, no, I went to basic training in San Diego, then infantry training at Camp Pendleton. But I was assigned a military occupational service number, which is 5544, French horn.
French horn.
And then from there, I went from infantry training, I went to a band which no longer exists. It was a sort of a big show band in San Francisco and Treasure Island, the Department of the Pacific Band. And I was principal horn there. And that's when I started making arrangements for ensembles within the band. And as a result, Colonel Chopper had just organized an arranging staff for the President's Own. And I was selected to join the arranging staff and be a horn player into the Marine Band. And
this was what, 1958?
58.
Yeah. And not to divulge a whole lot about your book, your upcoming book that'll be published sometime in December, from what we hear. But tell us some stories of your enlisted responsibilities with the United States Marine Band.
Well, yeah, in 1969, I was appointed liaison to, I was a gunnery sergeant. I was liaison to the White House for entertainment. You see, the band or orchestra backs many of the entertainers for state entertainment. And we would have rehearsals with the entertainer. I would provide an orchestra, whatever was needed. And also I would be the contact or liaison with the entertainment. And I did this basically in the Nixon administration. We had state dinners in California, arranged dinners for John Wayne, the Apollo 11, the big dinner at the Century Plaza in Los Angeles, state dinner for Korea in San Francisco, and the huge POW dinner on the White House lawn was the largest state dinner ever conceived and attended.
Who was the conductor of the band at that point? Colonel Schoper?
Colonel Schoper was director, and also assistant director Dale Harpham.
Harpham, okay.
And also Captain King was the other assistant director, right. And basically, most of the time, my association was more with Captain Harpham. The band would be on tour, so the home guard element, in which that's when I played more horns than I normally would during the year, because the band is divided into those on tour and those who are back for the White House engagements. My very first White House engagement of significance that I recall, pardon me, was for President Eisenhower and the young Prince and Princess of Japan, with a concert pianist, Coleman Bromfield, playing the Rhapsody in Blue. And that was my significant remembrance of then. And it comes like 30 years later when President Clinton is president and the young Japanese couple come back as the emperor and empress, and I was the colonel director of the band. So I'd say each of our careers came to fruition.
I think we're sharing the cover of your upcoming book, and it's a wonderful title, as you alluded to earlier, about Play On, your mantra, and it's a Marine's musical journey from the Bayou to the White House. It must have been quite an experience for you coming from Bayou Black to the White House. I mean, what kind of impact did that have on you?
Shall we say from Bayou Black to Maison Blanche? Right.
True.
Actually, I've often asked about if my family were musical. No, except my father was very, very fond of classic Dixieland jazz. I mean, classic Dixieland jazz. All the right chords, all the right rhythms, none of this bebop confusion. And my mother, I introduced her to my classic record collection. And her favorite thing of all things was the overture to Rienzi. And she loved Rienzi. So I felt that I became a very young music instructor in those days.
Well, good. I want to remind our audience that there are opportunities for you to ask questions if of the Colonel as we go along through here. You are more than welcome to type in a question, and we'll certainly pass it along to him. Colonel, under your leadership as conductor and director of the band, you took the band for the first time on an overseas tour. What was the impetus to take the band to Europe? What prompted that whole event?
Well, the very first trip was to Rotterdam, the Netherlands, in a trip with the Royal Marine Band of the Netherlands. Next trip was to Hamar in Norway for the Hamar Music Festival. Those were initiated by those two various countries. But the main trip that I think you're alluding is the Russian tour, the Soviet Union, in 1990. I don't know how hypothetically, the band was scheduled to go to the Soviet Union during the Eisenhower administration. But then, of course, we had the U2 episode, so all things of that sort were canceled. So, but the 18-day trip in 1990 was an incredible venue. Moscow, Kiev, Minsk, Lvov, and finally up in Leningrad. And the response was something like you've never seen. We played a huge concert in the equivalent of the Bourgeois military theater. And it was at the same time that the plenum of the Communist Party was held. And so literally all of the musicians of the Soviet Union were there at the concert, including Doc Schutzer, the fabulous trumpet player. And the response was, it was totally magical. It's just something I've never witnessed before. We were littered with flowers and people crying and people wanted to give you things and talk to you. I felt in a way that we sort of did what Napoleon was never able to do. We conquered Russia.
That's a great story. I've heard some of the members of the band at the time talk about that tour and how wonderful it was. The response that you just mentioned, the audiences everywhere were just phenomenal.
Yes, right. And also we did something that was rather unique. In Moscow, we played 1812, and the director of the Soviet band conducted, General Mikhailov. And the end of 1812, as you well know, it features the Tsar's hymn, as it does also at the beginning. But it was abandoned and basically forbidden in the Soviet Union after 1917. So we got to the end of 1812 in rehearsal, and we were handed these inserts to cover the Tsar's hymn, and they have the insert was sort of a tune out of Glinka, the Life of the Tsar, and that fit into the counterpoint of the end of 1812. Well, when we got to Leningrad, it wasn't on the schedule on the program. They wanted 1812 again. I said, well, we played the original version, which we had brought along. And they said, play it the way you play it. I said, well, it also does not have the way the insert you have. So we were also joined by a Navy band. So we instructed the Navy band to pull back the tape over their parts. And for the first time since 1917, the Tsar's hymn was played in Leningrad. That was sort of a first.
Yeah. You tell a story in the book of when you were on the arranging staff that there was a diplomat, I think from Russia, coming to visit, and you were told not to play Chopin. Yeah. Anything but Chopin for this reception. Could you?
It was the Khrushchev visit. Khrushchev visited Eisenhower, and they would have this meeting at Camp David. And so we were to provide a Quarterbox is like an accordion instrument with a trio and so forth. But the dictate was no certain things, no revolutionary composer, especially Chopin, because he's revolutionary. Well, Bill Jolly and I worked on finding things. I've found some Glinka, found some Mussorgsky, and made up some things that we called ersatz Russian. Well, they had the conference, and then Van Cliburn had just won the Tchaikovsky Prize in piano prize. So Khrushchev invited Van Cliburn to play for the return dinner that he gave for President Eisenhower. So He also requested of Van Cliburn to play his favorite composer, Chopin, and in particular, the Revolutionary Etude.
Sometimes the State Department doesn't get it quite right.
Well, they should stay out of music.
Exactly. Let's switch a little bit to, we're visiting here with music educators here in Louisiana. And as music educators and band directors, we all tend to have a particular, what we call band sound in our head that we strive for in our rehearsals and performances. Did you change the sound of the Marine Band after you became director, or did the band always sound that way? What was your sound?
My feeling is the only true band sound is the Marine Band sound. No, I changed, as my predecessor Jack Klein, I changed the seating from you would have on the conductor's right the cornets and the clarinets on the second side. We changed that, putting the brass behind, as you see them now, and all the woodwinds in front, what have you. But the main thing about the Marine Band sound, which everyone considers somewhat unique, is that we play cornets on cornet parts, trumpets on trumpet parts. We do not play all trumpets, which seems to be the cachet of now. Well, a lot of the music that may be written now is for trumpets, but definitely cornets and trumpets are two different instruments, two different sounding textures and timbres, and that's, I think, what you hear in the Marine Band. You hear the difference between cornets and trumpets.
Someone had once mentioned that after hearing the Marine Band, they likened the sound to a symphony orchestra.
Well, I do. I think you get compliments. You can take them as you get them, and not consider the source. But I think one compliment that I sort of registered, because I did something I worked on when I inherited the band. I sort of took an inventory of what is the band. Yes, it has this glorious technique, sound, technique, and a term that I sort of objected to that I heard from others is calling it the machine band. Well, in taking inventory, I said, what is it? It's got this fortissimo. It's got this forte. It's got this mezzo forte. And then it seems to it didn't go very far from that. And so what I tried to work on was keep what you have here, but let's work on the softer dynamic. And also nuance. Square brackets, no, round curves, breath. And so I alluded to the compliment I got that someone whom I respected highly said, your band can play softer than an orchestra. Thank you.
This may be a lesson or a pointer for the band directors who are listening in here. We all have heard bands play really, really well and really, really loud, but playing softly is difficult.
Well, the thing that I sort of discovered, and I'm going to be hated by the Reed section. What section do you think I had the most difficulty with in terms of achieving the softer?
Probably the clarinets.
Yes, indeed, it was. Because, each clarinet player spent a fortune on these magnificent sound studies, what have you, this great sound. Of course, that's great. But you're not a soloist, you're an ensemble player, and you have to match the other sounds, but also the dynamic. A pianissimo is a pianissimo. Yes.
Yes. Yes. So tell us about what you've been doing since your retirement. You've been retired now, what, 20?
Yeah, since '96. Yes.
Well, almost 25 years.
Yeah. Well, the things that thanks to Winger Jones, who's fulfilled this. When I went out to guest conduct, I always considered, I used the same editions that played by the Marine Band. And one of the very first things I discovered, the Great March, Old Comrades. Okay, I'm guest conducting, and I want Old Comrades. The edition that's put up is in the wrong key. Not only is it in the wrong key, but it's got added during the famous euphonium counterline. There's the trumpet fanfares. What? Then that started a project investigating what these editions are. For instance, Florentina. There are many things that have been added to Florentina that just do not exist in the original editions, and so that became my new project. And Florentina and Winger Jones accepted, and I started doing marches, also Sousa marches of codifying marches, and the suites, the Sousa suites, looking upward, and people who live in glass houses, and trying to bring clarification to a lot of the editions. And then it's gone on from there. So I'm very, they have been my sort of parent company in the Bourgeois editions with Winger Jones.
Yeah. One of the more thrilling things about visiting the Marine Band headquarters that I found was the library. It's just an amazing place. I have a question specifically about Sousa marches that you have in the library. Are there markings from when Sousa played these marches that continue on today, the tradition of playing them?
Yes, they're called Sousa Encore books. They're a set of books that he up from the Sousa band, and in many of the principal player parts, they'll be marked. Omit this first time, etc. Melodic brass out, what have you. That's how we get a lot of the ideas of Sousa style. Yeah, but of course. And then he didn't necessarily always do them that way, but that would be the general formula.
Right. Interesting. And you tried to incorporate those things in your editions.
I do. We call that Sousa style. You see the same thing in Keith Bryan and Laura Schissel. Absolutely. The main thing about Sousa style is you never change the harmony by any means. You never add anything melodically. And I think one of the famous additions that we hear in Sousa that is so incorrect is the Stars and Stripes. When you hear those trumpeting figures in the trio, no, that was made up of whole cloth. That was not Sousa. I think they've taken some of the orchestral versions and put them in, but you never change the harmony. A lot of the publications there, if you're going to edit, you want to clarify the articulation. It may not. There may be mistakes there, and what have you. But and also some of the drum techniques, which were added by Gus Helmica and accents, and what have you. But you do not change anything melodically.
But Mr. Sousa never wrote a roll-off at the end of his marches. I must tell a personal story. You came to conduct my band one time, and one of my drummers decided to put the roll off at the end of the thing, and you stopped the band and said, "Sir, Mr. Sousa never wrote that, and I don't expect to hear it again."
You're telling the second time. The first time it happened, I stopped and yelled, "Communist!"
Communist. We none of you folks out there have any questions other than Sheely Bell saying, "Hey, cousin, I'm glad you're telling your story." Are you and Sheely really cousins?
Yes, we are, cousin. Yes.
Oh, you cousins? Okay, good.
My Aunt Louise. and Darrow, right?
Right, right. We welcome questions from anybody out there. Several of you are online. I see Scotty Walker was here. James, Daryl Long is there. But you guys have no questions.
And then I have no answers.
And you have no answers either. The book is about the White House, and like we mentioned earlier, you served through 9 presidential administrations. What was as director of the band? What is the function of the Marine Band director vis-a-vis the White House?
We provide generally all of the music within the house: ceremonial music, reception music, entertainment, what have you. But you had said it's not just the White House. What I've tried to do, there has been no significant history of the directors of the band. And so I've tried to put that in chapter 2. So you're going to meet some interesting people that you've never known. And I didn't know and would research into them. So and also vignettes from stories of my dear friends and colleagues, both present and who have passed away, that I've been asked to write tributes to, and the latest, of course, being Al Wright. But it's not a total tell-all of the White House. There are several vignettes of things that happen with entertainers and things within the house, but really it's not that salacious. One photograph that I've seen shows that there was some function at the White House, and Leonard Bernstein was a guest, and he walked by the podium. But tell us a little bit about that. What was that like? It was a state dinner, I think, for Ireland, and several times Bernstein had entered several times. At this particular time, he had his cape on and flung his cape off and his cigarette, put it down. He comes over and I'm conducting the ballet music from Aida. And so he looks and I finished the first move. Then I gave him the baton and he continued and conducted the rest of the ballet music. Picture my looking, sort of remaining there over his shoulder. And I use the sort of caption on the picture is my first and best student. Yeah. Speaking of baton, you're known for conducting. Wait, I know you have them back there, but you're known for conducting without a baton. Yeah. Well, yes. I'll give you the origin of that. Please. It was the big anniversary of Interlochen, I think like the 50th anniversary of Interlochen, the band went up. And at the end of the concert, I was doing pictures of an exhibition. And then the braid on the uniform, it's right here. Well, I'm conducting, and the most crucial point of the end of pictures is when yum bum bing bum 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 yum, and my baton got caught in the braid, and I couldn't extricate it, so I just left it there, and they went. Yeah. And then what I would do after that, traditionally, I would conduct the anthem with a baton, maybe the first march with a baton. Then I started using my hands. So I finally decided that I would ask my concertmaster what the preference was, baton or without. And he said, actually, there's no preference. However, we watch you more carefully without the baton. Now, isn't that what it's all about? Yeah. Truly. Because I mean, I as a critic, I love to watch conductors. I don't get enough of them when I see symphony conductors, and I wonder what in the world are they doing, even with a stick, And I'm sure, and I've been told by orchestra members they're doing the same thing. I,
They're wondering what he's doing too.
I've seen these masterful gestures with foot-long batons, or for instance, in these huge gestures, and they're conducting the afternoon of a faun, but each bigger than the faun.
Our mutual good friend Paula Kreider is online, and I'll read you two comments she's made. The first one was, Colonel, I see you've cleaned up your office. And the second, she says, will you share the story about the lady was a tramp?
Oh, yeah. Well,
and we're not talking about Paula Kreider here.
No, that's not her theme music.
Oh, okay.
The Yellow Rose of Texas. This was the Queen Elizabeth's bicentennial visit during the Ford administration. We had music everywhere, and at that time is when in fact, that's before I was assistant director. I became assistant director during the Fords, but I was coordinator of all the music, so to speak. We had band on the lawn, we had harp and flute and diplomatic entrance, a string quartet here, the orchestra there, and then in the East Room, Captain and Tennille were singing, and you talk about Ladies and Tramp. The song that they were doing was much more pornograph than the Tramp. It was Muskrat Love or something. Well, the band, the 7-piece group, the dance band, was in the state dining room, and they're playing businessman bounce music, like a Rodgers and Hart medley, or instead of medley, string of medleys. They were playing a Rodgers and Hart medley. And then all of a sudden, I see the president leads the Queen in and starts dancing. And it happened that's why the Lady is a Tramp was in that medley. Nothing was said or heard of it. However, PBS was recording everything in all the rooms. And several weeks later, some wag discovered that. But I will say, when I realized and heard it, I braced against the wall and we removed the medley from the group.
Cindy has a question about your upcoming book, and I'll flash the cover a couple of times. Hopefully everybody saw that. The book will be available, we think, in late December through GIA Publications.
Yeah,
the catalog is coming out soon, and you should be able to order it fairly soon. And it goes into detail about some of these incidents that you've had.
The Paula Kreider stories, which I'm forbidden to tell you on screen, are in that book. All of you Texans, you must order 10 copies.
Daryl Long asked a question earlier that I'll be remiss if I wouldn't ask, and we can maybe end the session with this. What was your most not important but most meaningful interaction with a sitting president as director of the band?
Several. The Reagan first inaugural, because during the inaugural, Mike Ryan, whom I had to take from Bethesda Hospital, his back was out on a pallet, and walk down slowly and sing America the Beautiful. At the same time, the sun rose out, and I looked down on my monitor, and the hostages were freed from Iran. Yeah. And also, well, I guess the Reagan last day, he was a very, very friendly guy. He always tell you little stories and what have you. But I'd given him a harmonica. I'd heard that he played harmonica as a going away present. It was a large Marine band harmonica. And I said, Mr. President, we've so much enjoyed playing for you. We want to give you your own Marine band so you can play Hail to the Chief, whatever you like. Well, he took up the harmonica, and then I looked at it quizzically, and I think, oh, he doesn't play. Then he brought it up, and he played, I'm guessing he's going to play the Marines hymn. And he goes, Red River Valley. Valley, they say you're leaving, which had been his theme song on Death Valley days, but it was, very poignant. And well, each president that you spend some time with, you just fall into the aura of the person and the position.
Yeah, Colonel, as we wrap this session up, I'll give you the last word and maybe some words of wisdom to our music educators from here in our home state. What would you like to end with?
Well, in these difficult times, we're always alluding to the first responders, the people in the trenches. In music, you guys are the first responders. You are the people in the trenches. You're the people in whom we invest our future of music, through teaching children to love music, to perform music. You are my heroes. I only wish I could have been a music educator in that capacity. You're doing things, again, in a very difficult time, whether you're doing it virtually, whether you're doing it in school, doing it from home. Keep up the good work and play on.
Play on. Thank you, Colonel Bourgeois. It's been a pleasure visiting with you. Thank you all for joining us, and hope you have a great ending to your virtual conference this year. And as the Colonel said, play on.